So I thought I would maybe just speak to some of the components that are in your waterfall and why it's doing more than filter water. Okay, so first of all, I'm the co-author of this book, Dancing with Water. So I'll say we like gravity water systems. Okay, and the waterfall is a gravity water system. We have so much technology now that's associated with water. It's almost overboard. We're zapping water and whacking water and spinning water and all of these things. And some of them are natural and some of them are not. But a gravity water system emulates the way nature filters water. And nature does that slowly, naturally, and uses her forces. So you put water in the top, it percolates down just like water percolates down through the mineral layers of the earth. And in so doing, the qualities of water are changed. So typically, if we've got rainwater, it's been cleared, it's often quite distilled, the water begins to pick up nutrients as soon as it leaves a cloud. Coming down through the atmosphere, it's picking up gases, it's picking up other things in the atmosphere, but it hits the soil and begins to percolate through rock layers. And as it does so, it picks up minerals. Water was meant to hold minerals. This is the whole salt idea that you're talking about. Minerals in the form of salts are perfect because salts are ions and they have charges to them. And I know that your group understands the whole concept, especially of using magnets with ions. So ions are charged particles, they're active, okay? They can interact with other particles because of the charges on them. So water's picking up minerals, it's picking up energy, and as water moves and interacts with the magnetics of the earth, earth is a big magnet, and as ions move within a magnetic field, they spin. So you're activating the water as it's percolating down through the minerals. So here you have the waterfall. You're going to take the water down through layers of carbon first. You've got an activated carbon filter there. Purifying the water. It's got silver components in it. I like that too because silver is one of those metals that they call oligodynamic. It has antibacterial qualities. That's why people take colloidal silver. So you've got the addition of the silver in your activated charcoal filter. Charcoal absorbs and it grabs all of those contaminants. There are lots of carbon components within the earth. They're doing the same kind of thing. So you're emulating nature in this wonderful gravity system and allowing the water to very slowly percolate down through these different layers. The next beauty about the waterfall, the way I see it, is that Nikken has chosen to use the pi system as their way of structuring water. Now, our book, Dancing with Water, is all about nature's ways of structuring water, because there are tons of things that water does to bring and to maintain structure in its water. And so the Nikken system is using the pi system, which is based on some research that is actually quite old, and mostly the awareness is in the Asian countries of the whole pi system. So some researchers in the 1960s discovered that if you add the tiniest amount of iron in its ferrous form, the tiniest amount, you can energize water so that it supports the growth of plants. And it turned out, as they did more research, that not only does it support the growth of plants, but it supports the growth of all organisms, because this participates in the creation of a form of structure in the water based on the addition of those minerals and how they're interacting. But the other thing that the Nikken system is doing is there's a toroidal magnet in the spigot. Now, that's one of the most common ways of structuring water, is to send water, moving water through a magnetic field. And what happens when you do that is that all of the ions, if you've got minerals in the water, all of those ions are lining up against the magnetic field. Water is what they call a diamagnetic substance. It's not magnetic, it's actually the opposite of magnetic. So water repels a magnet. And in that process of being repelled by the magnet, the water is actually forced to align against the magnetic field. So remember, the water, because of the hydrogen and the oxygen, and the picture we showed early on, has got a positive and negative side to it. So that aligns against the magnetic field, and you've got these water molecules that, if they're spinning, going through a magnetic field, they have to align and realign, align and realign, align and realign. And that process forces something to develop that is referred to as coherence. Coherence simply means that these individual water molecules attain the ability to work as one. You're a coherent being, you and I. We have lots of independent parts of us. Each cell is an independent unit, but they're cooperative in how they work together as they come together as one unit, as one being. Either an organ or a tissue or whatever, they're acting as one. So water develops this coherence as it aligns and realigns within a magnetic field. I can say that in an electric field, something similar is happening, but it's not what happens within a magnetic field. So many dynamics happen in a magnetic field, and your group knows this better than most people, that interaction of life forms within, with a magnetic field. Some very beautiful things happen. So with water, you're getting one of those that's happening, and the water becomes structured. So you've got that magnetic spigot there, and the water ends up coming out of that and going through that magnetic field. But, and this is what I was telling you this morning, Dave, more than that is happening, because once that water gets into the holding tank, those water molecules are still moving. They're moving in a coherent school of fish-like fashion, but they're exposed to that magnetic field for the duration of the time that they're in that holding tank. Water responds to some very small magnetic fields. So even before it passes through that spigot, that water's sitting in a magnetic field. And as it moves past and through that field, it's constantly, very slowly and beautifully, the way nature does these kinds of things, creating and refining the structure of the water as it sits in that holding tank. So you've filtered the water, you've got nice clean water. Now you've got water sitting in this holding tank and being exposed to a magnetic field. And like I was explaining to you this morning, the longer it sits, the more refined that structure becomes. So it's a very beautiful thing. I was suggesting to you, and I'll suggest it to your group, that ideally you want to fill up that filter at night so that it sits longer before you start to take the water out of the system to drink it. And something else that we discovered, years ago we were doing some testing for a group that had a little machine that created structured water by vortexing it within a magnetic field. So like I said, this is a very common way of creating structured water. And the experiment was set up such that we were going to create the water but we wanted to show that the water would hold its structure for a period of time, because there are some things like ionizing water that will structure the water, but it doesn't hold because they're using electricity. So we had them make the water one day. It was supposed to sit overnight, and they were going to give it to several individuals the next day and test these individuals before and after drinking the water. So it wasn't part of the experiment originally, but the fellow who was creating the water and running the experiment decided that he would test the water before and after it had sat. And that wasn't really necessarily part of the test. We were testing the individual and for the individual's response. But this was GDV testing. It's a way of looking at the energy of the water itself. And he, at the end of the experiment, he texted me and he said, "This will be interesting and I can't explain it." He said, "But I tested the water before and after it had sat overnight. And after it sat overnight, it had more energy than when we first created it." And that's when we looked at, and I believe that at this point in time, we're the only ones who have really talked about this. And this is mentioned, we have a whole section on it, Dave, in the second edition of Dancing with Water. That's when we realized there was this component of stillness that's really important for refining and maturing water's structure. Victor Schauberger was one of the original people. If you dig into water very deeply, you'll come across his name. He was an Austrian forester. They called him the water wizard because he did so many amazing things with water. But he talked about water's refinement, and he always talked about it sitting in a nice oval shape in darkness and in stillness. So we started to put the pieces together and we realized that, yeah, there's this component of movement that's important. The water percolating down through the waterfall, that's important. Water needs to move in order to get those ions and, you know, create the magnetic fields. Water responds to spinning and vortices and all of that. But there's a time to be still and there's a time to be active. We sleep, we wake. Light and dark, it's part of the whole balance of life and the cycles of life. So water responds to stillness too. So now you have the water sitting in that holding tank, and the stillness is really a part of the refining process. So if you all will fill up those filters in the you know, before you go to bed, and let them sit in the darkness. That's another thing. I know your Pi system and the Pi ceramics that are used, the bioceramics, also have infrared frequencies to them. And infrared frequencies are another one of these things that produce structure for water. There are lots of different light frequencies, and the infrared band is the most potent for contributing to water's structure, and that's available in darkness. Think of night vision cameras. They're looking for infrared, and that's what you see on the screen. So infrared is available at night, in the darkness, and the stillness, and that's part of the process, and that's part of the beauty of what you have going on there. The other thing I picked up in looking at the design of this is that you've got this myophon stone in the bottom. That is a stone from the ocean. They have to dig down deep to get that, so it's an ancient. Of course, anything that's rock is ancient. No pollutants in that. It's got a whole plethora of minerals. So you're getting a nice balance of minerals, and it very slightly balances the minerals in the water, releases them in an oxide form, so you're getting the oxygen. And what else was I going to say about the Mayapan stone? It's called medicine stone in the Asian countries because they've used it for centuries to treat their water because it does some very beautiful things. So the addition of minerals also helps water to hold its structure because minerals add energy, they energize the water. And you saw that diagram in the beginning of the PowerPoint where you can see that, you know, water is a laminar substance, and it has these sheets of hexagonal subunits, and they're offset so that they can incorporate the salts. And actually the salts, when you put them in the water, they contribute to an even more complex crystalline structure. That's a whole nother subject that I won't get into. But there are layers of structured water that form around each ionic particle, and you know, salts are charged ions, so that contributes to the development of an even more complex liquid crystal that will hold more energy and provide the human body with this whole balance of salts like from the ocean.